Hello, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parshat Shemot, within which we're going to look at the commentary of the Ramban, see two of his comments to the Hakdama of Sefer Shemot, the famous Hakdama of the Ramban to each Sefer in Chumash. He has an Hakdama to Sefer Shemot. As well, we're going to take a look at the Ramban's commentary, Perek Daled Pasuk Yud Gimel, and through which we will see the humility of Moshe, the level that the Ramban stresses the humility of Moshe, and connect it to the Ramban's Hakdama to Sefer Shemot. Okay. Perek Daled Pasuk Yud Gimel and Shemot reads the following: V'yomer bi Adoni shlach na biyad tishlach. Moshe says to Hashem, "Send whoever you will." Hashem asks Moshe, "Go ahead and be my missionary, be the person who represents me, and go ahead to Paro and ask Paro to send Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim." We know famously that Moshe goes ahead and does this ultimately, though Moshe first refuses multiple times. On face value, one could question, why is Moshe turning down this opportunity? He was a prince in Egypt, not fully, though in a sense he grew up as the prince in the palace, though be it a foreign palace. Now Moshe has the opportunity to be a leader once again, or perhaps to acknowledge his full sense of leadership. And Moshe turns it down. He says, "Send whoever you will, though not me." Now, different explanations are given. The Ramban will focus on one explanation, and we'll tie it into, like we said, the Hakdama of the Ramban. First, the Ramban says, "Biyad tishlach, biyad misha taragil lishloach." The Ramban gives a couple of other options. He says, "Send Aaron, my brother." That's what Moshe was saying. Other reasons the Ramban gives are listed below, though the Ramban ultimately brings out one idea that I think is very important for us to look at. The Ramban writes that "V'nachon be'enai shlach na biyad kol asher tishlach ki ein adam ba'olam shelo yeh hagun yoter mimeni l'shlichut." The reason why Moshe was refusing so much, Shazot, Anuto Hagdola Mikol Adam Asher Pnei Ha'adama. Moshe's humility, his anava. And Moshe's humility stuck out. Moshe turned down this option of leadership. He did not want to, as the Ramban writes, Motzeyet libo litgadel, uldaber lamelach, v'sheit par lomar Hashem shalachani. Moshe did not want this sense of rising up that would come along with this sense of leadership. And therefore, Moshe refuses this opportunity to be the leader of Bnei Yisrael. Okay, now let's see why the Ramban was stressing this so much, perhaps. Moshe's humility comes to such an importance when we look at the Ramban's Hakdama to Sefer Shemot. The Ramban there explains, after we finish Sefer Bereshit, discussing the Yitzira of the Avot and the Yitzira of the world, and the Ramban writes that the actions the Avot took were reoccurring actions, meaning that these actions would reoccur throughout history. They would occur later on to their future generations of Bnei Yisrael, and it's all a Sefer Yitzira, the Ramban famously writes regarding Sefer Bereshit. Now the Ramban writes, we get to Ve'ele Shemot, and Shemot is something much different. It talks about the actions that Bnei Yisrael will take. It's a Sefer about Pe'ulot. The Ramban writes in his words, ואחרי שהשלים היצירה התחיל ספר אחר בעניין המעשה הבא מן הרמזים ההם, והתייחד ספר ואלה שמות בעניין הגלות הראשון. So the Ramban will continue with that thought, though what comes out is that the Ramban notices that this is a sefer of action, בעניין המעשה, and that's coming to show that once Bnei Yisrael has entered into Galut, as we saw at last week's Parshat Vayechi, Bnei Yisrael has entered Mitzrayim, and the Galut was started as promised in the Brit Ben B'Tarim to Abraham. And the Ramban, after showing famously the principle of Maseh Avot Siman Labanim, how what occurs to the forefathers occurs to future generations, the Ramban is famously now tying in and saying, now that Bnei Yisrael is in the Galut, they will not be out of the Galut until they leave Mitzrayim, but Yad Chazakah, and they build the Mishkan. And eventually they'll settle in the land that Israel has promised. Though until then, they will not be out of this Galut. But the Ramban, perhaps we could maybe put together these two ideas. We could conjecture to say that we need a leader who can represent us and can take us out of this galut. This galut is a tough galut. And after having the Avot's connections and the Avot's traits that are passed down to Bnei Yisrael can now remember Pakod Yifkod, and who better to send than the person who refuses to be sent. The person who has such a low spirit, someone who is so low to the ground. And Ein Kam Kamosha Od, there is no one else who will come who will be as humble, as close to God, as connected to God as Moshe, and only Moshe can be this intermediary and this middleman to connect Bnei Yisrael to the roots, bring them out of Mitzrayim, and ultimately to the Geula. Though perhaps we can put together these two ideas, seeing Moshe's humility as stressed by the Ramban, and going forward in this future parsha, we will see Moshe's actions come to fruition, and Bnei Yisrael slowly but surely leave Biad Chazakah, U'Vizor Netuya, Mitzrayim. Have a good Shabbos.